Welcome to this video on preferences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the preferences one by one. I'm just do a conscious stream of information about the preferences. I haven't prepared anything. I'm going to go into detail as what I know about the preferences, and hopefully this will benefit everyone watching this because there are numerous preferences, and I would say the majority of the people don't know what they all mean, and I'm going to try to help there. So I have running on the screen BizXpenseTracker, and the reason I've chosen that is because it would have all the preferences found in all the apps. I believe that's true, and this way we'll cover everything. So if you're using XpenseTracker, MileTracker, TimeTracker, or BizXpenseTracker, we should cover all the preferences. So let's get started. So preferences is accessible through the Prefs button from the log view screen. This is the log view screen. So we'll tap on Prefs, and these are all the preferences. If you ever need to know what version you're running, you come to the Prefs and it will tell you. And this version is running 9.01. There's a button where you can click and tell a friend about the app. You can email the author, that's me. You can email me by tapping that. It'll address an email, and you can just type to your content and send me an email if you have any questions or comments. Restore in-app purchases. What that is if you purchase any in-app purchases, and for whatever reason you've perhaps gotten a new machine, or you have another machine that you're using, if you do that, it accesses the App Store and queries the App Store and finds out all the in-app purchases you've made for this particular app, and it will enable them. Our other apps is just a list of other apps that we make. Here, depending on which app you're running, there will be one or more in-app purchases offered for purchase. In this case, BizXpenseTracker, we offer a custom reports add-on, a location awareness add-on, and an advanced file linking add-on. For more information on those, there's other videos on the custom reports. The location awareness, if you go to silverwaresoftware.com/locationawareness.html, you can learn about that. And the advanced file linking, to learn about the basic file linking, you would go to silverwaresoftware.com/files, that's a capital F, lowercase iles.html. You can learn about files. The advanced file linking allows you to link files of the Microsoft type, like Word or PowerPoint or Excel. And by the way, the URL I gave for the location awareness information, that's capital L, capital A. So it's silverwaresoftware.com/location awareness with a capital L, capital A, .html. All right, so these are the preferences you would set for the different, specifically this is for backing up. So if you want to back up via Wi-Fi, or you can back up via Dropbox or Box, depending on what app you have and what add-ons you have, you might not have all these options. Export services, that's the preference you set to where you want file reports that you export, where they're directed to. And sync services, well, that's if you purchase the device sync feature, you can sync your multiple devices via Dropbox. And if you have set up iCloud, you'll also see an iCloud option. All right. So let's get into the real preferences here. So there's this section called Defaults. Fast New Entry, if you tap on that, turn that on, when you hit the New button from the entry view screen, it will immediately come up with a new entry of this type. and you get to choose the type. So if you want, every time you hit new, instead of having the choice that says, oh, do you want to create a new expense or mileage, whatever, if you do the fast new entry, you get to choose what it immediately pops up. And of course, you can change it at any time within that entry. Let's see. If we turn that off, when you open up a new expense, the option to turn on this feature, which is immediately upon the new expense coming up. So if you do new and then new expense, when it comes up, it immediately will prompt you with a camera. Not a very widely used preference, so turn that off, but just for those who want to always take a photo and always have the camera pop up. That just saves a couple taps. A group, that's the default group that a new log will be filed under. So when you create new log, if you select this to one of the groups, that log will automatically be set to that group. Now, for those not familiar with groups, it's not as widely used feature, but groups sit above logs. So if you have a group, inside of groups are logs, and inside of logs are entries. Typically, when you create a new log, it defaults to no group, which is certainly fine. If you want to use groups, that's great. And if you have a default group that you want each new log to be filed in, you can use that feature. Log dates, this is a fairly new preference. What it allows you to do when you create a new log, you know you have the start and end date. Well, you can choose how those dates will be defaulted. So in this case, it's this month. So the start would be, I'm doing this video in August of 2014, so it would default to August 1, 2014 for the start date and August 31st for the end date. You can choose, there's plenty of different options to hopefully fulfill everyone's needs. Payment, this is so when you create a new expense, the default payment type is one of your payment types. You can, of course, customize your payment types. You don't have to have it say credit card. It could say Freedom Card if you want. You can just customize that and delete. You can actually delete, edit, and add new payment types. Okay, currency. This is pretty self-explanatory. You can set the default currency, and that's the default currency for the log. So when you create a new log, it will default to that currency. Send email, you can enter an email address so that when you do an email or report, it's already pre-addressed to that send email. And in addition, we have a CC email, so if you need to email it to someone and also CC to someone, that CC email could be yourself if you wanted. And so when you email a report, you don't have to go through the process of addressing the email. It's going to be pre-addressed. Now, if you're using an app that allows you to track mileage, which is all three except TimeTracker, you can choose to have the entry default so that when you do a new mileage entry, that defaults to either total or start and stop odometer. So if you always enter your total mileage, you always know the mileage, you can have the entry default to have it set to total. Similarly with the time entry, you can default that so that when you do a new time entry, and that would be if you're using BizXpenseTracker or TimeTracker, that the entry would default to total or start and stop. Per diem is an interesting feature. I'm not going to get into the details. If you go to silverwaresoftware.com/perdiem.html, that's capital P, capital D, you can learn all about the per diem feature. This is a feature that was requested by several customers quite some time ago and has evolved. If your company uses per diem, the app supports a single per diem, and what you do is you'd enter the per diem amount that you'd want to vault into that field. And we also have per diem on a per log basis. So if you have a different per diem depending on where you visit, you can go into a log and set that. But you can talk about that perhaps maybe in some other video. I don't know. So moving on, settings. Show number of incomplete entries in the app badge. So if you create a mileage entry or a time entry. And it has a start time or a start mileage, but no stop mileage. It will be counted as an incomplete entry. It will be shown with a yellow background, and the little number when you go to what Apple calls the springboard, where all your icons are, you'll see a little number indicating how many incomplete entries you have, and that's you can turn that off if you like, if you never want to be notified with a little number. Company name for reports, that's a name that will be filled into any reports that use the company name field. So some of the templates use the company name, and if you enter that in, that will be pre-filled into the report. That's the PDF reports I'm talking about. My name, my job title, similarly, some of the templates use that particular field and pre-fill, so you just enter those in. Set application password. This is where you would set an application password and clear the application password for the app. So if you tap on this, it gives you the opportunity to enter a password. You can give it a hint and also an email address. Now, what you say, what's the email address? The email address is an email address you enter in here when you save the password. And if you forget your password, you can have it emailed to that email. So you would not want to enter this email address as the one you get on the phone. You'd want to have some other email address or whatever. All right. So that's that. And if you do set a password and decide not to want to use it anymore, you can come into the same screen, and the name of it changes, I believe, to edit application password or something to that effect. Set CSV report fields. If you're creating reports, CSV type reports, there's four different format reports we create. If you're setting CSV reports and you want to set the report fields, you come in here, you tap on the fields you want to include, you drag them around in the order you want, you hit done, and then those fields will be included in the CSV. This is a global setting so that anytime you do a new log, these settings will be inherited by that particular log. You can also change that inside the log and make changes only to the log, and you can see that when you further use the app. The app downloads exchange rates. In this case, it's set to every 3 days. You can turn that off or set it less frequent or more frequent. And those exchange rates are downloaded from the internet. So if you have internet coverage, and it'll try to download the rates. Miles, kilometers. So if you're using an app that tracks miles, then you can set if you want to record your distances in miles or kilometers. Pre-fill start odometer. What that does is if you have a vehicle and you are using that often, then you're tracking mileage using odometer readings, it's very convenient that when you create a new mileage entry, the start odometer will be pre-filled with the last stop odometer. So by turning that on, that will enable that feature. Miles in tenths, that's the default, but you can, if you're just recording miles to the nearest single mile, then you can turn that off. So you would enter in miles, for instance, instead of entering your odometer reading 58,100.5, you just enter in 58,100. That's just, some people don't bother with the tenths. Round trip button. With mileage entries, with mileage entries, if you enter in if you enter a distance, it records a distance. Once that distance is entered into the entry, it will show an option to do a round trip. So when you tap that round trip button, this is actually what this preference is referring to. I had to think for a second here. Is when you tap the round trip button, what is it going to do? So it's going to prompt you and ask you, do you want to double? If you select this double, it's going to automatically double. Or if you select as entered, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to mark the button as being round trip. So choose as you wish. File encoding, this is specifically for CSV files. When you create a CSV file, special characters need to be encoded. So if you have any special characters, this is the particular code encoding. You're not likely to have to change this, but if you're savvy to this, if you're using a different language and need a different encoding so that all the special characters and all characters in your character set are shown, you'd want to change this. Geotag photo receipts, interesting feature, which is when you take a photo receipt, if you have this turned on, it will grab your current location and associate your location to that and embed that location inside the receipt. So if you were to say open that receipt in, if you're on Mac on iPhoto, you can actually see the location on a map of where that photo was taken. That default is off. Use decimal point. That's an interesting feature. If you prefer an ATM style data entry of numbers, you can turn this off, and what that does is it assumes a certain amount of decimal places and you enter the number. So for instance, if you entered a dollar amount in an expense, say $12.56, you'd enter 12.56. If you turn the use decimal place off, what you'd enter is 1256, no decimal point. If you entered in just simply 12, then you'd get 12 cents. If you entered in 125, you'd get $1.25, and if you'd enter in 1256, you get $12.56. So it's assuming a 2 decimal place for dollars or amounts. I don't want to say dollars because we have people using our app all over the world with different currencies. So keyboard clicks, that's just an audible click that when you tap the keyboard, you'll notice we have a custom keyboard, a very nice custom keyboard, which allows you to do arithmetic operations like multiply and add and divide, whatever. And that custom keyboard will click or not click based on that particular setting. Use bold font for keyboards. We had a customer ask us about, well, in OS 7 you can actually make keyboard fonts big, and we added that option, and it's quite nice if you like bold numbers in your keyboard, turn that on. Receipt naming, that's a fairly new preference, so that when you the default is date. It should be date. If it's not, date is what we've always have had. If you set date, then the receipt will include the date, of course, and the amount in the name of the receipt. If you select number, what happens is that it will, each time a receipt is captured with the photo camera, it's assigned a number, and that's the number that will be given to that and assigned to that file. If you want, you can actually begin numbering at 1 for each report you create, and what will happen is the internal number will be ignored, and 1 through N will be assigned to those photo receipts. What's nice about this, if you're doing PDF reports, that there's an option inside the report screen where you can actually include what we may call a badge or a little tag in the upper left-hand corner of each receipt with that number. You could also include the date too. So take a look at that. Commuter miles. That's a feature where if you commute and your commuting miles are not reimbursable, then what you'd want to do is enter a non-zero value there, and every time you create a mileage entry, there'll be a button where you can tap to say deduct commuter miles, and that'll just make it a little easier for you to keep track of your mileage. So if you go from home to work, and if you go to home to a client, say, and you've gone 50 miles, but typically you'd commute to work, and that's 10 miles, it'll give you the option to deduct that 10 miles and show only 40 that's reimbursable. Autofill mileage if from to previously traveled. So what that does is if you enter your from and to in a mileage entry, so say you enter in the from as you selected from the frequently used list as home, and then you select the from the frequently used list for to work, it will know that, oh yeah, I've done home to work already, and that's 15 miles, pre-fill it. But if you don't want it to do that, you turn that feature off. Pre-fill from field with last to field. Now that's kind of a neat feature where what that'll do is it keeps track of your last place that you went to, and the next time you create a new mileage entry, it'll pre-fill the from location with the to. So it's sort of it's a jumping point from where you can create I guess a bunch of entries that very quickly. So that's all I'll say about that. Field usage. This is going to be easy to explain except for some little details. This allows you to turn on and off fields in both, well, there's one field that you can turn on and off for the logs, and all the rest refer to fields that are in the expense entry, or not the expense entry, the one of the entries, either expenses or mileage or time. So for instance, if you don't use the payment field, you don't care that you're paying with Visa or cash, you can turn that off and never be bothered to have to enter that. Mileage category is a field that allows you to set if a particular mileage is business or personal. It's very focused. That's all it is, business or personal. There's no other options. If you need more options, explore the subcategory feature. So you can actually have subcategories of the mileage. Mileage allowance, that's the value that you get paid per mile. By default, that doesn't show up in the main mileage entry. It gets showed up when it gets displayed when you tap on the mileage entry field. Gallons is a new field for the app. It allows you to track the number of gallons. You can turn that on so that when you say if you have a fuel entry, you can type you can enter the amount of gallons that you've filled up. Time category, that's similar to mileage category. Time category is a little more broad. It allows you to enter in if it's work, vacation, sick, or other, I believe. And turning that on, you'll see the new field. Client, that's pretty self-explanatory. Employee, that's applicable for time entries. Description, you've seen all that. Merchant, similarly you've seen that. Location, that's actually a field. You can set the location. It's a very cool field where it will auto pre-fill your location, and so you can keep track of where that expense was made in the world. And that is storing GPS location, and you can actually then see that. Yep. Project, that's a very frequently used field that people turn on. You can actually rename this field to something else. We'll see that further down. Rate, that pertains to the rate in time entries. Earned, also time entries. Files, this is a field that people see, but I say definitely explore. It's a really cool feature. silverwaresoftware.com/files with a capital F.html. You can attach files to entries that you receive from email. Very cool. Multiple vehicles, those are for mileage entries. So if you have multiple vehicles you use, turning this on will give you a vehicle field and be able to create a frequently used list of vehicles. In addition, if you're using the start and stop odometer tracking of mileage, it will keep track of the stop odometer for each vehicle. So it's very nice. Reimbursable, that's a on-off field. Reimbursed, that's an on-off field. If you need to track these things, these are very valuable. You can always filter by this on screen and in reports. Receipt number, This is a fairly new preference. So if you want to assign a receipt number to a photo receipt, and you want to assign it your own receipt number, you can. And that custom receipt number will be used when naming the files, as long as you have that option that we saw before, that you want to name receipts with number. Have receipt, that's just an on-off to indicate that you have a receipt for that entry. Notes, a very widely used field. I'm going to turn on the project field. So we can go here. These are two customizable fields. That means you can rename these to anything you want. These are text fields with frequently used lists. So if you never use the project field, but you have a need for a field that's text oriented, that has a frequent used list, you can come in here and tap on it and set the name. Similarly with merchant as well. All right. This is those time categories. If I go right here, up here, and we look at time category, if you turn this field on, then you will be able to customize these time categories: work, vacation, sick, other, to whatever you need. Value added tax, that's if you're using VAT or what is it, GST, I think. Well, you can name whatever the value added tax name that your country gives. You can set the percentages, and that will all pop up in the expense. You can also choose if you want the VAT to be an additional or included in total. And for those who are familiar with VAT will know what all that means. So turn that off. Mileage allowance. So when you create a mileage entry, you can, by default, it will use this first one, which in the U.S. is 56.5 cents per mile. If you travel for medical reasons, the allowance is different, and you can adjust these here. This is global, so this is for all entries, all mileage entries. You would adjust it here, and then any changes you make here do not change existing entries. It only will change any new entries you create. Okay. CSV files. Well, when you create a CSV report, you can turn off including the header or the column headings. If you're familiar with CSV files, you'll know what all that means. Client field. This is a very convenient set of preferences where some people, whenever they meet a client, they only meet one person, so you'd want to choose that. And what that does is that speeds data entry up, because when you enter in the client, you tap the client name that you've visited, it will immediately close the screen. If you have allow many, what it'll do is it'll keep the screen open where you can tick off several different clients. That's the power of that feature. Use client's rate. This would be applicable to BizXpenseTracker and TimeTracker, where if you select a client, then the rate you charge them will be automatically pre-filled with the last rate you charge them. That's very handy. Show only tasks for selected client. So what that is if you select a client and then hit the task field. So the task field is the same as the description field, but it's just renamed tasks for time entries. So you'll see only in the frequent list, you only see those tasks that are associated with that client. What that is nice is that it pares down that list, so you don't see a whole load of tasks, you only see tasks that you would do for that client. And that makes sense. If you have a client, you're typically doing same tasks or for that particular client, and there are tasks that you will never do for that client. So that's kind of nice. To location remembers client. What that is, if you select the to location that you're going to, it will pre-fill the client with the appropriate client that we know is at that location. And you can experiment with that. That's a really cool feature. Second line display. So if you know when you're in the entry view screen, there's two lines. The top line is gives the detail and the date, whatever. The second line, if it's an expense, will show the description. If it's a mileage entry, it'll show the from to. If it's a time entry, it'll show the task. And you can edit these. You can say, oh, I want to see the client if it's an expense. So you can choose that from any of these items. Similarly with mileage and time. Now time entries, obviously that only applies to time entries. You can have a rounding when you enter a time entry. You can choose to use hours and minutes or hours and decimal. Allow recording number of visits is a feature that only applies if the rate is a visit. So if you say you get paid $25 per visit and you have this feature on, it will allow you to enter how many visits. So for instance, you're visiting a hospital and you're visiting rooms in a hospital and you have this feature on. Well, if you've visited 20 rooms and you get paid $25 per visit, then it would do the multiplication and enter the appropriate number. Allow entering tips. So if you're a waiter or a waitress and you're recording your time and you also want to record your tips, if you turn this on, there'll be a field that allows you to enter in your tips. And treat as income. That is a preference which, if you're entering time entries, they're typically, if this is off as it is by default, considered the same value as an expense. So time entries, expenses, mileage, they're all considered positive values because you're potentially going to report those and create an invoice for those to bill for. But if your income negates expenses, you'd want to turn that on. Like that. And finally, overtime. So if you're using TimeTracker or BizXpenseTracker, you can set the defaults for overtime, and I'll let you look at that at your leisure. So that was all the preferences. Hopefully I've covered them enough in detail. It's kind of a long video, but if you really want to know as much as you can about the preferences, this was a real good description of all the preferences. We did not go into the details of the preferences of a log. If you open up the log details screen, you'll see quite a few of these duplicated for logs. That's because you can override the global settings and make them just for a given log. I urge you to take a look at that. So when next time you create a new log, instead of just entering a name and hitting save, scroll up, take a look, see that you can actually have that log be unique and have unique preferences. Given that, if you have any questions, please email me at scott@silverwaresoftware.com. Also, we have a forum on our website, silverwaresoftware.com. Hit the forums button and you can post any questions. If the question happens to be something you think that would benefit others, post it and we'll get back to you and submit and post a response so all can see. And then I urge you to watch some of the other videos. We've got some really good videos on backing up and restoring, getting started. So if you're just getting started with the app, definitely watch the Getting Started app. It'll give you an overview of how to really get the most out of your initial use of the app, and then as you dive in deeper, you'll want to watch the video on getting the most out of the app. That's going to be a video. It may have a different title than that, but it'll be for, I guess, named like power users or something like that, because it's really go into the details of some of the real nitty-gritty features in the app, and those are for the people who really want to learn every single thing about the app. So that's all. The video is a little long, but hopefully it's going to be valuable to you. And please tell your colleagues and friends about the app. Word of mouth is very important to the success of the app, and thank you for listening.